Good evening, everybody. Tonight, I'd like to talk about helping those on the autism spectrum that have a diagnosis of severe autism. One of the hallmark characteristics in autism is a delay in or total lack of the development of spoken language. It's actually been estimated that up to 66% of those on the autism spectrum do not develop communicative speech. Without functional speech and language, these individuals face tremendous challenges to be meaningfully included in education and community settings. Establishing even low levels of communication is an essential and crucial need for these individuals, without which they cannot function. Not only is this socially important, this is also economically important. It's been estimated that the lifetime cost of care for an individual with autism ranges from 1.4 million for the milder forms of autism up to 2.4 million for those cases of severe autism. Annually, this causes a cost of care spending of 236 billion, and because of the increasing, exploding numbers on the autism spectrum, over the next 10 years, this figure is even going to rise up higher, up to 461 billion. Let's think about this for a moment. 461 billion on annual autism cost spending. If we can shift some of these high-intensity 2.4 million level individuals to that lower level of intensity, where they're only costing 1.4 million, by enabling them to better communicate and better functioning in society, that actually represents a cost reduction opportunity of up to 53 billion US dollar per year. So the bottom line here is providing the proper services and interventions, preferably early on when the child is most responsive, that in return can help to save a lot of money in the long-term run. Now you might ask, how could we ever accomplish such a tremendous task? Fortunately, there are a set of strategies and tools out there that are called Augmentative and Alternative Communication, or AAC for short. AAC replaces natural speech and writing through alternative means of communication. For learners on the autism spectrum, these alternative options might include things such as teaching them to communicate through manual signs and gestures, or enhancing communication by pictographic symbol sets and systems. And with advances in high technology, we have seen more and more popularity in solutions surrounding speech-generating devices for digitized and or synthesized speech output. And these devices can come in two different forms. There can be dedicated devices that are primarily made for the purpose of communication intervention. And then there can be multi-purpose devices, mostly iPads and tablets, that can serve communicative intervention, but also a large range of other different functions. Specifically, this technology area has recently undergone a lot of change. Before the year 2010, this area was dominated by these high-tech speech-generating, dedicated speech-generating devices. These devices came in at a very high price tag, between $2,000 and $10,000 US dollar. You had to go through your speech-language pathologist to get a prescription, and then families often had to wait a very long time until such a device was finally funded by insurance. AAC intervention with these devices tended to occur more and more in isolation. It was the speech-language pathologist sitting down with the user once or twice, maybe 3 times a week in a more isolated classroom or therapy room. And much of this has changed ever since in 2010 there was this mobile revolution in the AAC field. The iPad and other tablets came out, and they brought a lot of changes to the field. As a consumer, you can now get an iPad or a tablet off the shelf in any electronics store. Downloading an autism therapy app or AAC app can only cost between $0 and $200. You can do it yourself. You no longer have to go through prescription by a specialist, no longer have to wait for insurance to fund that solution. There's many organizations out there that might even spend some grant money on getting iPads and similar devices for learners with severe autism. This also opens the opportunity for intervention within a more shared community, because it's easy to share content and data because these devices, the device that the student uses in the special ed classroom, the content and data from that can be shared with the device that the student is using in his home setting. Now, with all those new opportunities, there are also some challenges. Current solutions surrounding iPads and AAC applications are often solely focused on getting the learner with severe autism to a relatively simple level of just symbolic communication. The child is activating graphic symbols on the iPad screen and makes some basic choices, and then the device is providing the speech output. The challenge for us in autism intervention is to go beyond this current standard of care, and we want to actively target more advanced speech and language skills, get that learner to that higher level of participating in society by acquiring the proper social communication and social interaction skills. On top of this AAC field is sometimes full of some misbeliefs and unfortunate myths. Myth number one, that we often get to hear is, my child will never learn to speak. Once we are going down this route of AAC intervention, the device is always going to be the talking for the child. Why should he or she be interested in developing his or her own natural speech? Myth number two oftentimes is, my child will always depend on an assistive device. There is that misbelief that once I put a device in front of the learner, the device will do all the talking and the individual depends on that for the remainder of his or her lifetime. There are also other folks out there that tend to think, well, all we gotta do is just find the right piece of technology, put that right piece of technology in front of the child, and that resolves all of the problems. Now, what does research have to say about these misbeliefs? In our research lab at Purdue University, we have been tackling with many of these issues over the last few years, and I'd like to show some of the highlights from those clinical research endeavors. The first video that I will show you will give you an overview of what participants with severe autism look like. You will get to see David and Mallory. David is 10 years old and diagnosed with severe autism, is minimally verbal. And Mallory is about 6 years old, also minimally verbal. Both of these children, you can observe the typical autism symptoms of stereotypical behavior, such as jumping up and down, the typical hand flapping. They have aberrant speech, such as echolalic utterances, stereotypical vocalizations. They have not learned an AAC strategy yet, and their current communicative repertoire is pretty much limited to just reaching and grabbing for items. Here are David and Mallory. Look what I have. See, you want the toothpaste.
You're fine. No. Drama queen.
Both children participated in an iPad-based intervention study, and now we're looking what happens during and after intervention. Now this is a few weeks into intervention, and then we're also going to see the children at the very end after intervention has stopped.
Toothpaste.
Fruits, yum, yum, yum. Can you say it, David?
I want toothpaste.
Excellent. Before?
Checks.
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 Yep, excellent. This is better.
I want Pringles.
Pringles. I want Pringles.
How do you ask?
I want a big candy cane.
You want your big candy cane. There's your big candy cane.
So you could see how over the course of AAC intervention, not only did these individuals learn to communicate through the device, they also developed their own natural speech along the way. And with the last scene, it was clear that the learner did no longer depend on the iPad. He was able to request using his own natural speech. On top of the behavioral evidence, we've also been able to gather neurophysiological evidence in our research lab. This picture here is an EEG scan of the autistic brain in a 14-year-old participant before and after intervention. This is the brain scan before intervention, and the different colors correspond to different electrical states in the autistic brain. Everything that is red means there's too much electricity flowing through the brain regions at a certain moment in time. Everything that is blue indicates not enough electrical activity is taking place between different brain regions. And everything that's green, that means this is activity closer to that of a typically developing peer. So here we have before intervention and over the course of a 6-month period of AAC intervention facilitated by an iPad and the proper application. This is what we are seeing. Many of these reddish and bluish areas resolve into the more normalized, more greenish, more areas that are closer to that of the typically developing brain. That neurophysiological data tells us our AAC intervention efforts are on the right track. Not only are we making an impact on functional communication, the effect is at such a level that it even manifests itself at the level of brain neurophysiology. Right? Once initial communication is established, once the individual is able to communicate basic wants and needs, it is important to expand the communicative repertoire, to go beyond requesting, to actively target and expand communicative functions, move into labeling and commenting. One great strategy to accomplish this and to boost up emerging language is shared storybook reading, and the user with severe autism can participate in these activities by following along and reading along in the book using his iPad, again with the proper software on it. Kids with autism that use AAC, they should get access to the same books as their typically developing verbal peers. Here's an example of what this looks like. This is a 6-year-old child with severe autism. He has just learned to make his first words, and now we are following up with a shared storybook reading activity.
Go away. Face, go away. Face. Tell it, go away, face.
Go away, face.
Go away.
Go away, face with teeth.
Oh, that looks like teeth, but it's a mouth. You got it.
All right. As speech and language progress, we want to move into more advanced language training. It is now important to teach advanced language concepts and their generalization. Typically developing children around 2 years of age, they have a vocabulary of about 40 to 50 words. Individuals with severe autism, however, often do not reach that developmental milestone. Here in that photograph behind me, we can see how an individual with severe autism, again 10 years old, is working on an iPad application to teach him the combination of actions and objects, and he's doing this in a very fun and engaging way. This is like playing a game, and through that he gets enabled to produce more complex utterances either through his own natural speech or through using the device. And finally, it is important to remember that communication always takes place in a social context. In intervention, we cannot separate language training from teaching the social aspects of language. In this last video clip, we will see David again, and now he is communicating with his father and his favorite caretakers while they are engaging in some social play activities. Activity number 1 is doing some table games, and David is learning turn-taking and communicating the proper steps of that game. And in activity number 2, David learns to participate in a little science type of experiment where the instructions are being delivered through the iPad application. And again, David is advancing to that stage where we're not just targeting speech and language, we're also teaching some social interaction skills along the way.
Daddy, you,
U.
pull, oh.
Orange.
All right. This one? Is this one the orange one? All right. Oh.
For this one, you can say, I.
Pour baking soda.
All right, here you go.
Right? From these various research and clinical activities, we have learned some very great lessons. And now it's time to debunk those myths that I spoke about earlier. Myth number 1 was, my child won't learn to speak. What do we have to say about that? Well, the truth clearly is, AAC does not prevent natural speech production. And myth number 2 was, my child will always depend on an assistive device. As we have seen, children can either completely outgrow the iPad or tablet device, or as they progress and advance in their skills, the function of that tablet device might become a different one, and we might target different skills as we are targeting further developmental milestones. And myth number 3 was, all it needs is the proper AAC technology, but just putting a tablet or another speech-generating device in front of the child will not automatically get that client to communicate. We need to make it work for them. We need to engage them in fun, engaging, motivating activities to maximize outcomes and intervention benefits. If we are keeping these principles in mind, we can fully unlock the communication power in our learners with severe autism, and suddenly AAC becomes a whole new meaning, and we will see many, many more awesome alternative communicators. Thank you so much.